And we're live. I'm going to be like cutting in and out because my next door neighbor has a carpenter over there, and you could probably hear the circular saw going as it's chopping up wood and doing it, I guess, floor paneling, or I think they're doing floor paneling or fixing the walls from, I don't know, water damage or something. All right. So today I am going to do something somewhat different than what I usually do. As you know, I'm learning. I have article from Bounding into Comics that's going to talk about this half species thing, as today's subject is about half species and races. And I'm going to talk about that because that's the hot topic to talk about. And I'm probably going to have a different take than what a lot of the mainstream people like to talk about. As I like to say, it's like if it were happening in a vacuum, these decisions really wouldn't matter. But it's the justification and reasoning behind it that's the problem. And marketing wise, or like strategy wise, in terms of business, it's a really dumb decision for Dungeons and Dragons to go this direction without like some foresight or some forethought as to how it's going to impact the game. And there's also something else that's kind of hidden in there about it that I don't know if people recognize it or not, but one of the things that's hidden about this Wizards of the Coast removing the half race thing is they're not going to allow them at any sanctioned events, quote unquote. So you're not allowed to have a half-raced character at any sanctioned event. So that is something that's kind of like hidden in the detail that I don't see many people talking about. They're focusing more on half races be gone. And, you know, the inherent racist idea of the company for having this idea that like, oh, half races are inherently racist somehow. To me, it's like that's just silly. A lot of what Dungeons and Dragons is fantasy. It's fun. It's imagination. And you're allowed to have these dynamics. You're allowed to have these conversations in a fantasy. You're allowed to have these conversations in a fun environment where you can just express yourself and interact with the world. And that's something that I think Wizard of the Coast doesn't understand, evidently, because you don't have to necessarily have half creatures in the world, like the NPCs, but the option should be there for the players. The players should have that option. They should be allowed to play with those things, especially since that is something, I don't want to say unique to Dungeons and Dragons, but it is something that's very appealing about Dungeons and Dragons, is the fact that it's like, okay, these species are crossbreedable, that each one has the ability to intermingle with another. You can get a half orc, a half goblin. How do hobgoblins exist? Well, I believe a hobgoblin is an orc and a goblin got it on. So half elves. Elves are very breedable across several species. They can go with humans. They can go with Aasimar. They can go with, centaurs are another popular half breed. But elves are like so versatile. They can go with dwarves. They can go with colossals or giants, depending on which one, or a titan. So it's like the different species and different races are interchangeably mixable. How do we have half dragons? Well, I'm not sure you want to answer that question. We might want to get out our pitchforks if we start asking, how do we have elephant men, and how do we have lion men? I know gnolls, if I recall, gnolls are actually a twisted They're a creature of twisted magic. I believe also Rakshasa. They're also twisted magic. Rakshasa are they're from like Hindu folklore. They're basically a tiger that stands upright, and then they have their hands are in reverse. They have a reverse hand, so their palm is technically on the back side of their hand, and their fingers close in the reverse order. So they're very weird creatures, but yeah, they're also known as tricksters. But yeah, so like these are some iconic creatures, some iconic races in Dungeons and Dragons, and they don't have to call them races. You know, Star Wars calls them species. And it's like in Star Wars, they have, because Star Wars is very dynamic. Star Wars has all kinds of cultures and ideas for these different species and races and biologies, that they're able to do all kinds of good stuff with it. And if they wanted to have like a species that was crossbreedable, they have them. I believe it's the Twi'lek in Star Wars. They are capable of, like, they're considered like S tier when it comes to sex. Okay, like everyone has no problem screwing them. The problem with that is, if I recall, Twi'lek can only get other Twi'lek pregnant. So you can breed with them all you want, or I'm sorry, not breed. You can sleep with them all you want, but you're not going to be able to procreate with them. So you can't create half breeds. But there are some races that can create half breeds, as far as I know. Like I don't know of any rules saying that they can't. It's just generally people do lean towards their own species, because that's how you procreate. That's how you grow your family, and that would be why you would procreate, because you want to have a family. You know, you wouldn't procreate. Well, I shouldn't say that, because there's the Serene, or notably Ki-Adi-Mundi, the Jedi Master. He has multiple wives specifically for the purpose of breeding, because his race is by the time of the Old Republic, they're nearing extinction. So it's a necessary thing to prolong their species and to keep them going. Is they have one male have several females, because there's more females of their race than males. You know, but that's a unique thing, and that's the dynamics to even that character and that species, is to indicate a different culture facing a different problem in the context of this galaxy. Again, that's fantastic writing. That's fantastic lore. That's rich. And so if someone wants to make their character, this is where I rub elbows against, or I get, I don't know. It rubs me the wrong way, where D&D is like, oh, we're getting rid of half races because they're inherently racist. It's like, well, why not let people have that decision? Like, they don't have to have that lens. They don't have to have that negative connotation. And I want to smack this guy with the goddamn circular saw. Sorry, I wanted to get that off my chest because I thought that was funny. So what I'm going to do, I've been floundering, giving people a chance. Up. Let's see. I've been floundering, waiting, giving people a chance to hop in and watch. So now we have Nathan in the chat. I spoke to him just before the stream. He was kind of like, Nathan, you are the one keeping me from getting on. D&D will fight racism by being racist. Yes. That seems to be their slogan. And answer, magic. Yes. Magic is a great thing for like having multiple species. It's a great thing for having different interactions between them. In Star Wars, they have magic explain Anakin Skywalker's birth. So, and then hashtag humanity first. Or as some of us older people know it as, pound humanity first. Smooth, Nathan. Smooth. Pound humanity. I'm all for pounding humanity. We're going to pound them into the sheets, into the mattress. We're going to make them moan our name. All right, so what I'm going to do is let's pull up this article. I'm going to read through this article from Bounding into Comics. And then I'm going to break down said article. Not break down the article, but break down the topic because, if you can't tell, this is something I like. All right, so Dungeons & Dragons to remove half species from player's handbook claim the entire idea is inherently racist. In their last step forward, this is by Spencer Bakuli, April 4th, 2023. So this is old news by the news cycle standards, but this is going to be my take on it. In the last step forward in their long march to lost profits, that's true, Wizards of the Coast has revealed that they will be removing the concept of half species from their Dungeons & Dragons player handbook on the grounds that they are not comfortable including an inherently racist concept in the game. Yeah, I'm sure Gary Gygax was absolutely thrilled to be considered a racist. This forthcoming update was first announced publicly at the recent D&D Creator Summit, an event wherein Wizards of the Coast gathered a number of notable personalities ranging from game developers to content creators and provide them with a sneak peek at Dungeons & Dragons' upcoming releases. Following a rocky start to the summit marred with various technical difficulty issues, the publisher eventually hosted a demo of their upcoming D&D virtual tabletop. After which, D&D led rules designer Jeremy Crawford, senior story designer Chris Perkins, and studio art director Josh Herman appeared at a Q&A session with the attendees. Eventually, the post-demo Q&A turned into the topic of Wizard of the Coast's ongoing efforts to sanitize D&D, beginning with a question about how exactly the publisher makes use of their sensitivity readers. Sensitivity readers are people that they read through your material and they make sure there isn't anything offensive or potentially damaging or risky to the brand or to the business. When I was in college, they used the example of the Gerber baby, where what they would do is if you ever see the Gerber labels, they have the little babies on them for the baby food, and it's basically to tell you it's baby food. Well, this is like universally accepted in our culture. But when they took this and they advertised it in Africa, their culture was you put the picture of whatever is in the container of food. So they interpret it as this is literally baby paste, as in a baby is in it. And so they didn't sell their product very well in Africa, and they were confused as to what was the disconnect. They're like, the different countries need baby food, and we're giving it to them in the hundreds of thousands, and they aren't consuming it. What's going on? What's the disconnect? So they decided to do some research, and that's how they came to this understanding of, oh, snap. Well, that's what a sensitivity reader is supposed to do. They're supposed to understand and dig into what are these potential risks. And well, in today's world, they've taken on the role of sanitizing things so that it's for babies, pun intended. We don't send everything to the same people all the time, Crawford explained, of their content review process, per a summary of event posted in the EN World Forum by user Brimmels. I think they're talking about their forum, and recap provided by the content creator Daniel Kwan. Different reviewers have different areas of expertise and experience. No shit. Everything gets sent to at least 2 people, sometimes more. The old inclusion review process had holes in it because they would only send. Sorry, I'm seeing some cross-eyed here. Where was I? They'd only send out what they thought would be a problem. Now everything is sent out, so we aren't guessing what might be a problem. Okay. From just a strict business standpoint, that can be a problem. That can be costly. That can be time consuming and potentially unnecessary. And I would say in Dungeons and Dragons case, it is unnecessary. It's a fantasy game. It's a game. Like, nothing in it should be considered offensive unless it's outwardly trying to reflect our world and reflect an offensive nature about our world. Like if they're starting to go down the rabbit hole of referencing things of World War II, World War I, they're trying to reference the hippie revolution, then you might say, okay, there's a problem here. But this is a fantasy world. This is all made up. It's exclusive to this world. It has nothing to do with our world. The most it has anything to do is we play it. So, like, this shouldn't be a problem. This is nonsense. Our team are game designers and storytellers. We're not experts in culture and inclusion. That to me is like, okay, so you need to hire a department specifically for culture and inclusion, specifically for those two things. Like, no, that's again, to me, that's dumb. Your storytellers, your game designers, do those two things and do what you have to do to tell your story. Tell your story. Don't sanitize it. Don't modify it. Don't edit it so that it's more digestible. No, tell your story. Now, make the story coherent. That's what I would be concerned about. That's what I would have your sensitivity reader, called an editor. I would have them go over it and make sure it's understandable. I'd send the draft to several people, let them read it and let them understand, like, hey, this is what I'm reading. And is this the message you're trying to get across? Is this the goal of the story? Hey, I don't think this really reflects what the character would do because of XYZ. That's what you should be doing. That's what storytellers should be doing. Game designers, they should actually be play testing it. That's what they should be doing. They should be asking people, hey, here's the system we have operating. What do you think? How does it play out? Like, that's what the game designer should be doing. He added, so we're focused on what damage should these creatures do. That's why everything goes through inclusion review now, so everything in our game brings out the light. I'm going to have an aneurysm over this dumb point. So I spend a lot of time in my games. This is just my games. Okay, I could be wrong. I spend a lot of time in my games coming up with mechanics and different things to make my encounters engaging, fun, interesting, frustrating. Like, that's what I do. So I get where they're coming from, where it's like, oh, I'm trying to tell a story. I'm trying to control the creature's damage. I'm trying to do these things. And I'm over here scratching my head because every single dungeon master I have spoken to who's actually been dungeon mastering for over, let's go 5 years, over 5 years, every single one of them have told me the CR system that Dungeons and Dragons uses is absolute garbage. So for these guys to be like, oh, we're focused on what damage a creature should do and blah, 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 to me is just, it's baffling, because it's like, you don't, your creatures and their damages and their ratio things, they don't help us. They don't. So, like, you're coming up with these numbers that we as DMs could just change on the fly to fit our scenario. You'd be better off if you were like, okay, hey, these are the ranges we recommend for this encounter. If you have a low-level party, go with 2d6 damage. If you have a medium range party between level 6 to level 12, go with 3d8 damage. If you're with an endgame party that's between level 13 to 20, go with 5d8 damage or 8d8 damage. Whatever metric that Wizards of the Coast is considering as like, hey, this is what they should have. So again, I look at this and I'm just like, you're worried about damage for creatures. And this could just be hyperbole. It could just be an example that he's throwing out saying, oh, this is why we're not focusing on any of this stuff. That could be what he's doing. Okay. Which, here nor there. Like, I get it. I get what you're doing here. All right. I'm just saying you're coming up with stuff that me as a player or as a dungeon master, I can just override and say that doesn't apply to me. And I do that 99% of the time. I don't go off of what these people tell me to do. I go off of what I know my party is going to encounter, and I go off of what game I'm going to run. So this probably doesn't apply to me. You could say, yeah, it doesn't apply to you, Jack. Like, why are you concerned about it? All right. Well, just me as a DM, I'm just putting my side of it. So when I see a line like this, I'm sort of like, this is kind of bullshit. That's why I'm calling it out, because it seems like bullshit. It's like, oh, we're worried about how fast someone should move. We're worried about how many actions per turn. We're worried about what spells should have an action versus a bonus action, reaction, full round action, concentration. Like, and I've already ranted before about True Strike, how stupid True Strike is. Like they didn't fix that. Like, if you guys are focused on damage, fix True Strike. Just fucking fix it. So then the other thing is they're trying to bring out the light in every aspect of the game. That's not possible. That's, again, more bullshit. That's not true. You can't bring out the light in every aspect of the game. If someone wants to play a rogue, and that's the only character they want to play, they're going to play a rogue. Okay? They don't want to be a heroic knight. They want to be a shady person who sits in the corner in one of the many corners of the tavern. That's what they want to do. You're trying to bring out the light in everything, and you're killing the uniqueness of everything. Even reprints are going through inclusion review. Okay. I mean, if you're going to do it, you might as well commit to the bit. That's why some older books are changing too. Now, again, me as a nostalgic guy, I would say, no, leave the old books alone. Just don't print any more of them. You don't have to print any more of them. Just leave them alone. Be like, all right, we're done printing them. They're outdated. Further elaborating on Wizards of the Coast's process, the designer detailed, we get a full report, then address the issue identified. We have a conversation, then it goes back to the reviewers so they can see what we did and comment as to whether it addressed the issue. This is all standard. This makes sense. It's like, okay, you identify a problem, you attempt to come up with a solution for the problem, then you send it for review to see if it actually fixed the problem. And then you give it a green light or you give it a yellow or red light, depending on what happens. And then it goes, either continues on the process or it circles back around to the original process or through the creative process again. Yeah, I do this all the time when I'm making custom items for my players, when I'm making boss fights for my players. I review it, I sit on it for a while, I review it again, I sit on it for a while, and I just keep going back and forth with this until I'm satisfied, or until the players reach the encounter, and then I just shove it off the cliff, and either it works or it doesn't. I've had pitfalls where I had one of my fights where I've talked about this before on stream as well, is with Volskargel, one of my bosses. He summoned a minion that just instantly one-shotted almost everyone in the party. And that wasn't the intent of that encounter. It was supposed to do a lot of damage. It was supposed to be, if the party didn't manage it right, it was supposed to be a one-hit KO. Or not a one-hit KO, like a one-hit potential KO. So, because the idea of it is when this mob comes out, they have to focus the monster and kill it. And so, yeah, they weren't prepared for that. And I completely annihilated the entire party at full health with only one player surviving. And I said, okay, I need to mid-game tweak this because that's not supposed to be how powerful this thing is. It's supposed to be a major threat, but it's not supposed to one-shot the entire party. So I had to rewind time and pull up wave my DM magic wand to undo that damage. We also now send art, even the sketches, through a review process. Jeremy thinks of it as inclusion collaboration because it's a conversation going on. Whatever Care Bear idea they want to have for this, that's between them. Like, whatever. To this end, Crawford then confirmed that due to the game now having 4 elf variants for players to choose from when creating a character, standard elves, high elves, wolf elves, and the drow, the player handbook would soon be revised to do away with half species. Could probably pull it up here to look at all the different elves. Okay. I think 5e tools is not working. Let me look up 5e tools. Okay, there we go. Let's look at races. All right. Oh, no wonder. Okay. Let me share this. What's the elf? Okay. These are all the different elves. Actually, I should blow this up. All right, so we have the astral elf. Let's see if we get some images. All right, so you got some images there. Astral elf. We have the standard elf. And we don't get pictures of the drow elf. We get Eladrin elf. We don't get a picture of Eladrins. Oh, we do. Okay, they look like the standard elves. We get the high elves. Looks like standard elves. Elf Mark of the Shadow, or Mark of Shadow. Don't get pictures of them. We get Elf Pallid. Get a picture of them. We get Elf from the Sea. We don't get a picture of them. We get Shadowkai elves. We get Wood elves, which look like standard elves. And then you have an assortment. Sea elf. Oh, there's a sea elf. I mean, we actually get a picture of a sea elf. And then we have the different variants of half elf. So, and each of these, like it's shown here, like their ability stat, they get ability stat modifier. So it's like they all get dexterity because that they're elves, but then they get like a constitution or a wisdom or an intellect or charisma. They get just these different stats, and it's to kind of help you min-max or build your character how you want to build them to be good at the thing you want them to be good at. Okay, which you can do away with this system. There's a way to do that. Getting rid of it. I'll talk about that in just a moment. Let me go back to the article. All right. Frankly, we're not comfortable. Here's where they have that coward language. Frankly, we're not comfortable and haven't been for years with any of the options that start with half, he explained of this decision. The half construction is inherently racist, so we simply aren't going to include it in the new player's handbook. I have no idea how it's inherently racist, because are donkeys just inherently racist? Are ponies inherently racist? What about oxen? Like, there's all kinds of species in real life that are hybrids, and they're just a thing. They exist. It's what they are. So it's something that I don't quite get. I don't understand it. To me, it's stupid. It's stupid, and it's virtue signaling nonsense. You know, like, and again, I'll point out why in just a moment. I'll point out why. Because it's not like we have other systems to point to that can completely solve this problem and not do what they're doing. You know? Unsurprisingly, Crawford did not expand on this accusation, and thus his reasoning behind this claim remains unknown. I think we all have a pretty good idea as to the reasoning. However, despite the removal from the player's handbook, Crawford assured players that if someone wants to play those character options, they'll still be in D&D Beyond, and they'll still be in the 2014 player's handbook. Okay, that seems good. That seems nice. Like, all right, cool. All right, you're not limiting creativity. Fantastic. That's a main concern of mine. And I was pretty sure when this all happened that they were going to be okay with this. They were going to be like, oh yeah, players are still going to be able to do what they want in their game. It's their game. Go for it. So I was pretty sure they were going to give that little caveat, that escape. And I think a lot of people are getting upset over the former. They're not paying attention to the fact that the caveat is there that you as a dungeon master running your game, you're allowed to have anything you want in your game. It's your game. And I also note that one of the key words here is they talk about the player handbook. They focus in on the player handbook. So it makes me curious. I doubt it with this type of language that they're talking about. Maybe if there's enough pushback, they might change. But I doubt it. They might have that in the Dungeon Master Guide where they say, hey, here's how you handle having mixed races or mixed species. It should be noted, though, players may still be allowed to create half characters, thanks to their removal from the core materials. Such characters cannot be used in an officially sanctioned event. So that basically means this is the deception part here. It's like we're gonna allow players to create the characters and reference them in the books, but if you bring one of those characters to our sanctioned events, they're forbidden. They're not allowed. It's like now you're stifling creativity. Now you're stifling people from being and fulfilling the characters that they want to fulfill. I don't get it. So I guess no longer half orcs are a thing. You're not allowed to be a half orc. You can't be a half elf. Can't be a half giant. Can't be a half gnome. Can't be any of those things. That's silly to me. As of this writing, is unclear when the player's handbook will officially be revised, nor when it will hit shelves. They're probably going to focus on making a 6th edition before they really mess around with revising the player handbook. That's my opinion. I could be wrong. I'm probably wrong, but that's my gut instinct on it. All right. So that's it for that. So Nathan says, I regret nothing. Okay. So I'm going to turn over my notes here. And I want to point out that how you can tackle this issue. There's 2 ways that I know that I can think of off the top of my head. Because again, my attitude is creativity. I look at the creativity. But you have games and systems like Cyberpunk. You have games and systems like Star Wars. I'm sorry, brain farting. Star Wars. Star Wars calls them species. That's what Star Wars calls them. They don't call them race, they call them species. If it doesn't matter to you, fine, go for it. D&D could just call them species, half species. Problem solved. Whatever. However, we have an even better way of doing this, which is the cipher system way of doing it. And again, I'm gonna preach and shill for cipher because I love the cipher system. Cipher breaks it down into 4 categories, and I'll translate them over for Dungeons and Dragons. So first they have type. The type, there's 4 types. They're basically classes. So D&D has like a bazillion classes. Cipher only narrows it down to 4 basic archetypes. Then you have flavor. Flavor is basically, if I might get this wrong, but if I recall correctly, flavor is basically race. Okay? It's a unique thing to your character. It's specially defined. It's whatever traits and aspects that your character gets, it comes from its quote unquote flavor. Okay, and your flavor shouldn't cross match or mix with someone else's flavor. So if I am the medic, that would be my flavor. My flavor would be I'm a guy whose entire career is focused on being a medic, and I'm the party's healer. Someone else's flavor is they spent their entire life focusing on the arcane arts and studying magic and unlocking books. That would be a flavor. And that's essentially what race does in D&D, is that it gives you like, hey, you can see in the dark. Hey, you're really good at luck. So if you fail, you can get a free luck roll to re-roll that failure. Okay, like that's what these different things. Oh, you can fly. You can swim really well. You can. You're a cannibal. That's what flavor is in Cipher. Then you have focus. Focus in D&D terms is like your subclass. So your class would be, hey, I am a paladin. Your focus would be, I am a vengeance paladin or a conquest paladin or a devotion paladin. And then the last one is descriptor. Your descriptor is basically your background. It's where you come from, what little knickknacks you might have from where you came from. So it's like your description is that you are a doctor. So it's like here, have a bunch of doctoratorial things that will hopefully work with your kit and work with how you built your character. And so that there, right there, that's a way you can completely circumvent race. You get rid of race. Race isn't relevant at all. And you still have the core of the character. Now in Cipher, depending on what you're playing, you can you let the players decide what their species is. Like that's the idea, depending on the genre, obviously. You know, if you're playing with cowboys, you might not want to have someone playing a Yoda. You know, it's like you don't fit in the genre. But if they want to be, if it's a Star Wars genre and they're like, I want to be half Yoda, half Zeltron, then go for it. Like if the DM will allow it, fine. Like it doesn't matter. It's all fantasy anyway. It doesn't impact the character sheet at all. It would more so impact your character's story. And that's the key with Cipher is it's about the story. It's about your character's experience, their journey, their adventure. All right. So now I want to, now I broke that down, I want to focus in on why is race important? Why are we even talking about this, right? Well, to me, the importance of race comes down to the distinctive features of that race. So when you have the distinctive features of that race, it lets other people know who have some form of familiarity. It creates a point of familiarity with something distant. So you don't know what it is, but you have an idea of what it is. So, like a fruit, you can look at something and say, that looks like a fruit. I think it's a fruit. I know what a fruit is. I don't know if that thing is a fruit, though. And then when you slice it open, you realize, okay, this is a fruit. So that's kind of one of the purposes of race, is to say, okay, I acknowledge that is a dwarf, or I acknowledge that is a ittercap, but I don't know that dwarf. I don't know that ittercap. I don't know what their motivations are. I don't know anything about them. I just know what they are. I know what they can do based on what limited knowledge I have on their species. Now, you can go further into the deep dive of it, where a species has a culture. They have a society. They have an upbringing, an evolutionary chart of where they came from, a history. And you might have limited knowledge on what that culture and society is like, but it starts as a foundation. It starts as a grounds so that you have something to talk about. If you're not from America and you come to America to try understanding what is American culture like, you're going to have some idea. Chances are, most likely, you would have some idea of what American culture is like, but to experience the culture is different from knowing what the culture is. And it allows you to engage and allows you to have some level of exchange with people because you're learning about them. You're gaining knowledge. So that's something that when I look at things and I see something like a different culture, I see it and I say, okay, I know a thing or two about that culture, but I don't know this person. They could have their whole arrangement of, say, nose piercings. They got a bunch of nose piercings or tattoos on them. Okay, I get that person is from Greece. I might know that person's from Greece, but I don't recognize their shirt. Like, I don't know, is that a football team? Is it a metal band? Is it a country band? I don't know. I just know this is a person with a lot of piercings, and I know they're Greece. They're from Greek. So I think I said that wrong, but I don't care. So that's part of why race. That's another reason why race is important, because it helps you understand the context of their culture, where they come from. So dwarves are often held in the idea of mischievous. They can be honorable. They can be stubborn. Everyone knows dwarves can be stubborn. But that doesn't mean all dwarves are. It just means generally they are. And if you know generally that's what they are, then you know generally when you approach them, be prepared for that. Now, you might say, well, that's stereotyping. We shouldn't stereotype. That's a bad thing. Stereotyping can be a bad thing. And I think stereotyping is one of those great bad things, because if you do it improperly, okay, if you do it improperly, typically it means your downfall. Typically. You're like, oh, I'm going to stereotype this person, or I'm going to stereotype this thing. And it's like, okay, you just stereotyped it. And now you're going to isolate it, or you're going to make assumptions about it. And those assumptions are going to bite you in the ass. It's like you see a crocodile and you're like, oh, I handle lizards all the time. I know how lizards work. I know how lizards function. So a crocodile is just a big lizard. What's the difference? And you go up to the crocodile, you treat it like it's a monitor lizard, or you treat it like it's a bearded dragon, and sure enough, you get eaten because it's a crocodile. Like, the crocodile doesn't have the same fears that a bearded dragon does. Sorry, I had to catch my P90. It was dropping off the wall. So it's like the inherent problems with stereotypes fix themselves, in my opinion. They fix themselves. Like, I don't get it. So sorry, I had to put down my P90. So that's something I don't get. I don't get it. And it to me, it comes back to the main reason that this is even a topic, the main reason that they have that Wizard of the Coast has a problem with this. It comes down to the fact they have a problem with individuality. Because in a vast culture, in a vast society, all right, we hear this all the time, everywhere. Just turn on a news station when they talk about the state of affairs of the world. Okay. They'll talk about climate. They'll talk about culture. They'll talk about laws, restrictions, regulations. They'll talk about crime. And each culture is different in all of those things. Some people, they're okay with the crime. Some people aren't okay with the crime. It depends on where you're at. Depends on what culture you're in. And, you know, I have several European friends who believe in their heart of hearts, based on what the news media has told them, they believe that America is just a complete cesspit of crime, that literally every single American is toting a gun, that we're just frequently going around shooting everybody. And that's just the everyday American life. Like, to them, it's a miracle that we make it past one day without being shot. And it's they don't believe me when I tell them I am perfectly safe. Like, I live in a crazy city. So it's like, it's dangerous to walk down the street, sure. But no, people aren't getting shot. Like, bullets aren't flying in every direction. But furthermore, when I relay to them my misconceptions about their culture, they laugh because they find it funny. And I laugh when they have misconceptions about my culture. Okay, we laugh at each other's misconceptions because it's like, wow, we're so ignorant. But that's the enlightenment part. And that the enlightenment part is a part of your individuality. That's a part of what's so great about it. That's what's so great about stereotypes. That's what's so great about being ignorant, is that moment the light bulb clicks in your head. And there's a lot of stories. Disney used to tell all kinds of stories like this, where the light bulb would come on and you would learn the moral of the story. You would learn the lesson that the story was trying to tell you. See, Nathan's chiming in here. For me, I think it just boils down to us not being able to have nice things. Yeah. That could be it, sure. And that's, Nathan says, and that right there is why I resent Euros. Yeah, I don't want to say I resent them. You know, I take this perspective of just everyone has different perspectives. Everyone has different goals and different minds on things. So I don't know what experiences someone else has had that they're coming to a different conclusion. I know that they had conclusions, or they've come to conclusions that I don't agree with. I have strong opinions that I don't agree with on people. One moment. Okay. Sorry, I had to respond to a message. So, those are some of the factors that I'm looking at. I consider. Let me turn on streamer mode here, so I'm not getting boo-whooped by Discord. Nathan says, let me rephrase that. I resent the ones who never bother to learn the culture of America, but feel like they are fit to tell us what we should be doing. Yes. Yeah, that I would agree. I would agree 100%. It's like what we do here, I wouldn't say works elsewhere. And that's something that when I've talked to people in the past about America versus anywhere else, it's like you guys don't have our culture here. You guys have a completely different culture. And that comes with the creation of your nation, the creation of your society and your culture. At the creation is where there's a difference, because you got to have people who fundamentally agree and rally behind what the foundation of the nation is before you move forward. And I think that's something that's great about America, is the fact that it was a very, very strong push for what Americans' values were or should be when our country was founded. There was like, I don't want to say it was unanimous, but what came out of it was something unanimously agreed as, this is good. Now, if you're a biblical person, you could probably pick holes and say, well, it's man-made, there's going to be flaws in it. Sure. I'm not going to argue that. But, overall, our society has agreed this is what's good. Around 5. One moment here. But yeah, so that's why I see this as this whole issue with the half race thing being removed. They should just settle on, hey, we're getting rid of race entirely. We're just getting rid of it. And players can play whatever race they want to play. And we're going to have species of monsters so that players can interact with monsters. And we're going to have species for the characters in the world. And we might have modules where you don't have species. We'll let the players decide what species they want to interact with, what species they want the NPCs to be. That would be a sure bright idea. Wizards of the Coast, call me, hire me. Make it so that it's like, hey, we don't know what race the NPC is. We're going to leave that to you, the dungeon master or the player. Let you decide what the shopkeeper's species is. That's an option. That favors freedom. That favors individuality. And that's my angle. That's how I look at it. I like freedom. I like giving people the option. I don't like telling people what to do. I like to give advice, give guidance, which is why I'm doing this. Nathan says, this just in, D&D hires former DM. Sales skyrocket. I wouldn't say I'm a former DM. I'm still a DM. If they hired me, that'd be great. I should say it'd be great for me. Well, no. Great for Dungeons and Dragons, probably terrible for me. Because, I would write something and then it'd say, oh, this is a problematic. We can't have this. And I would be like, why? Like, it's a story. And I was talking to someone gosh, who was I talking to the other day about it? I remember. I was talking to someone about some very spicy topics. Some very spicy topics we were talking about. And I'm not going to go into the details of them. Just know the topic of a certain level of sexual abuse came up. And I told the person that it's like, well, my attitude of it is I'll write anything, as long as I have a story for it. I'll write anything, because the idea of the stories is, how do you have evil if you can't have evil be evil? Like, for me, this is just for me, I like evil to be evil. And I've said this before. I hold it as a deep held belief that if you have evil be themselves and you let evil do the bad things that normal people don't do, that normal people don't have the stomach for, it creates the call to action for heroes. It creates the call to action for good people to step up and stop a bad thing. And I know I've gone back and forth with the benefactor on the stream. He's tried to shy away from it because it creates a circular debate back and forth over good versus evil. He is very clearly on the side that evil is no different than good. They're the same thing. I fundamentally disagree with that. I look at it as the difference between good and evil is the intent. The intent matters, and you have to put that against the outcome. So you can attempt to do good and do something bad. That's possible. But your intentions are good. Now you're like, well, all right, so you do something, your intention is good, you do something extremely bad, so all's forgiven because your intentions were good, right? And it's like, no. You measure, sorry, I'm going to move my microphone here. You measure the intent versus the actions, and then the outcome, okay? The outcome is what determines whether it was a good thing or a bad thing. Sorry, I have people who are screaming at the top of their lungs through these thin walls. So that's how I rate it. It's like outcome versus intent versus action. So when I look at things like that, that's how I see good and evil. It to me, it creates a blanket spectrum where a good person can do bad and a bad person can do good. Okay, it's just, I also look at it as like good versus evil. The lens they come down to is like, okay, good people lean towards doing something. They lean towards a positive outcome. So it's like, you see someone dying of thirst, laying in the street or on the sidewalk. Their voice is hoarse. They say, "Can you get me a glass of water? Can you get me something to drink? All right, I need a drink." And you have a bottle of water in your hand. It's unopened. A good person would say, "Okay, here, have mine." A bad person, I want to draw a distinction here. It's not necessarily a bad person who would walk away, because you can be afraid of your safety and be like, I don't know how to talk to this guy. I don't know what scenario he's coming from. I don't know if he's genuine in needing water. I don't know. I'm going to walk away. I'm going to remove myself from that situation. Let someone else more capable, I'll let them help this guy. An evil person says, I'm going to take this water bottle and I'm going to pour it right in the street in front of him. That's what an evil person does. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't understand. A lot of people who like to make excuses for evil, they come at it with that idea of, oh, well, just because you're evil doesn't mean you have to do bad things. Well, no, it does literally mean you have to do bad things. It means that your perception of reality, your perception of how things are evil. They're sinister. Now, you could say there's different degrees of evil, that sometimes evil can do something good. But your lens, when you're an evil character, your lens of looking at things is evil. It's slanted. It's corrupted. It's tainted. All right, let's see what he's got here. He got, oh yeah, those commies would be critical of you drinking water, probably. Yes. Yeah, we had that discussion a few days ago. It was pretty enlightening. I think he's referring to evil characters and doing very horrible things. Yes. And chaotic neutral. Screw you. I need the water more. Yeah, that's the chaotic neutral route. The chaotic neutral route is like, hey, I don't know. I know I need this, so I'm going to proceed forward. I'm going to, you get yourself your own bottle of water. However you have to do it. Go ahead and do it. Leave me out of it. Because I need my water. I don't know why you need water. I know why I need water. It's chaotic neutral. So I tend to like chaotic neutrals. Don't know why. Well, the chaotic neutrals, in my opinion, I know a lot of people don't tend to lean this way in their beliefs. They typically think most people are in the neutral good category. They're either in the neutral good category or chaotic neutral. I personally think a lot of people are in chaotic neutral. Just because, like most people are, they're not aware of their own agenda. They're not aware of what it is that they're out to do on the day to day. They can simplify it, like in their mind, they could say, okay, I got to go to the grocery store. I have to go to work. Like they have their agenda in their mind as to like, okay, these are my priorities. Like, got to take the kids to school. I got to drop off my paper to my professor. Like, these are things that are in our minds, but we don't really think about the lens in which we're filtering those things through. When I was in college, they called that emotional IQ. And that's, it's a form of emotional IQ. It's also in like the category or umbrella of critical thinking, where you're aware of how you feel about a thing. You're aware about your emotional feelings. That's emotional intelligence. Critical thinking is thinking about thinking. So it's like, we're here talking about alignment. What am I thinking that I am talking about it? Like, what am I thinking? What's going through my head as I'm saying these things? What are my thoughts about, like, why am I passionate about this subject? Why am I even talking about this subject? That's thinking about thinking. But yeah, chaotic neutral characters are very appealing. They tap dance that line of self-centered, and they can always just, I mean, I would say chaotic neutral is the character type that I think most people go for in any game. I was going to say D&D, but no, in any game. It's a part of why people like the gray Jedi in Star Wars, because it's basically, fuck you, I'll do whatever I want. And so it's like, okay, fuck you, do whatever you want. That's what chaotic neutral is. It's the fuck you, I'll do what I want. Me personally, I lean towards good characters. I prefer, I don't care which flavor of good. I tend to play when I write Batman, play Batman in role plays, I lean towards chaotic good. But just because you're in one category, that's usually referring to, that's your like default. That's where your comfort zone is. That's where your character, your personality gravitates towards. That doesn't mean you can't do a neutral good thing or a lawful good thing. People change, they evolve, they mature. It's like every 7 years people change. So it's like logical for a character over time. And this is a problem that a lot of people have with their dungeon masters. I've seen it several times, where a dungeon master will change someone's alignment on one decision, and it's like you didn't have any build up for it. Like, you should have warned the player, hinting, guiding them. As they're making more and more decisions leading in a direction, you should have been tallying that and then indicating to them you are sliding. Like, you're sliding in that direction. One of the things I like about the Star Wars system is that they have the dark side, and the dark side allows you to award dark points for evil, and you're allowed to award light side points for good, because it helps guide the players into understanding what's good and what's bad. Now, in that system, both circumstances require a large amount of good or a little bit of evil, really. They're complete inverses. It requires a lot of effort to do something good, and it requires virtually no effort to do evil. One of my players in my game, he wanted to be a Dark Jedi. And so when he saw how I changed the system in the Star Wars D20 system, when you use a dark side force power, you automatically gain a dark side force point, which to me is stupid. Like, that doesn't make any sense. To the Star Wars system, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, it does, but it also doesn't. I'll put it that way. It does, but it doesn't. Where on the light side, it's really hard to get a light side point, other than leveling up. When you level up, you get a light side point anyway, which a light side point you can use interchangeably with a dark side or a light side, where dark side points are exclusively dark side. So at any rate, this player was telling me, he's like, well, with your criteria of good and evil, I'm not going to be able to gain any dark side points. I was like, well, no, that's not true. You can easily gain dark side points just by killing people, like just murdering people. And he was like, oh, it's like, yeah, if someone surrenders to you and you decide you're going to execute them, that's evil. Like, that's straight up evil. You're going to get dark side points for that. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. Then I'm good. Like, yeah, you'll be fine. Now, it's the light side people, they have the harder road to take, because they're taking the good. They're being the good boy. So it's like, you can't just simply kill people to solve your problems. You can't just simply manipulate and lie to people to solve your problems. And you have to be prepared for evil to step in your way, because again, evil is a lot easier to do. So when evil steps in your way, you have to be prepared to say, okay, I have to counter that evil. I have to be prepared for evil to try and sabotage or undermine what I'm trying to do. Which goes back to what I was saying earlier about evil stories. That's a part of the fun for me with writing evil stories, is the fact that we get evil stories where good people try to thrive and climb, and then the evil comes in to knock them down a peg. And then it's a back and forth struggle between good and evil over who can gain control. And you do the theme of it. I've talked about Columbo before, the TV show Columbo. There's a moment in it, or a quote, that Columbo says to one of the villains as he's talking to them very casually. He explains to them that he can have respect for the murderers that he deals with. However, he doesn't like what they do. He's like, what they do is a terrible, horrible act, murder. But in terms of, how honest they are, how genuine, how seemingly nice they are, they're sincere in what they do. Like they're sincere in who they are. So he draws a very nice distinction between, a person who makes a mistake, because in Columbo, they cover like the different types of murder. Some are intentional, some are accidental, So if if they're an accidental murderer, Columbo will understand. It's like, okay, you were a good person and you made a mistake, and you got clumsy in trying to hide your mistake. That's the main thing that happened here. That's how I got you. But then you have the other people who are like, oh, I'm smarter than the cops, and I'm smarter than the detective, and I'm going to pull one over on him. I'm going to hide this murder, and I'm going to get away with it scot-free. You have those people. Those people are malicious. They're evil. And Columbo spots that. Columbo's like, yeah, okay, this is an evil person. I know what their whole agenda here is. So for me, when it comes to creating a character, and when it comes to like freedom of choice for the characters, that's what I'm looking at. That's what I'm concerned about. I'm like, hey, I want to be able to make my character. If I want my character to be a half-breed, I want to do that. If I want my character to be a mixed, or a full blood or pure blood, I want to be able to do that. And that's a part of the thing that makes me disappointed in Wizards of the Coast with this. It's like, this is so unnecessary to even go down this road of, oh, we're not comfortable with half anything. Just rename it species and call it half species. They're going down this road, this idea of Dungeons and Dragons is inherently racist. And it's like, well, if you believe it's that horrible, if you believe it's that disgusting, just pack up your bags and go home. Like, just stop everything, because you're never going to fix the problem. Just make your own game, make a new game, an entirely new one, and say, all right, this one had its run. It's done. Like, close it up, close up shop, start a new one. And they're not going to do that, but that's what they should do. Because it's like you're moving away from what it was. You're moving away from what the creator intended for the game. You're supposed to be doing adventures. You're supposed to be having all kinds of fun with the world and with the adventures with your teammates. So that's just something that I don't like. And I've said before, I was very apprehensive when it came to Cypher. I thought, oh, it's going to be another ripoff of Dungeons and Dragons. It's gonna be like a Walmart brand Dungeons and Dragons, and I have no idea why I stuck it out. Why I decided I would keep playing it. I was like, I'll see where this goes. Let me see where it's going, and I ended up saying, okay, I like this. This is good. It has a lot of potential, and it's a lot more, for me at least. It's very good at storytelling. It allows me to tell a story. It allows my players to tell a story. It allows me to be creative, challenge my players, and allows my players to feel like they're involved in the creative process. Nathan says here, they could, but they won't. These piss heads want to corrupt what's popular. Yes. I don't want to go in a whole rant, because I will go into a rant. So I'm gonna try. I'm trying to maintain. I'm trying to hold myself back from ranting, because I know people are probably like, we want you to rant away. I'm like, I don't want to. Been talking for almost an hour, so like I'm feeling my voice like get exhausted. It's like, come on, rest. I'm like, no, I have my tea here. So I'm going to keep talking on my thing. Yes, Nathan says, yes, let the rant flow through you. Yeah, I ranted the other day, and my friend had said that after I ranted for like 5 minutes, she was like, well then, that was a soliloquy, if I could say that word. And I was like, I prefer rant, but sure, I'll go with soliloquy. I'll go with that. Go for it. Or is it a soliloquy? I don't know. I don't care. Nathan says, since when are you Shakespeare? Well, that's funny. I was actually in one of the stories I was writing earlier. I was quoting Shakespeare, and it was very, I don't want to say tongue in cheek. It was being said by a villain. What was the line? The line was, where is it? I'm reading through my work to see if I can find it. Here it is. He says, if you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? I had the Penguin saying that. And he's speaking to Zatanna. And so he's saying this to her. And I put in like an editor's note that he's intentionally leaving out the part where wrong us, shall we not revenge? And it's like, yes, that's the Penguin. Like he's manipulative. He's a master at cunning and guile. So of course he's trying to woo a woman, a pretty woman. He's going to mislead her and make her think of himself as a good guy. But it's also hilarious because he's socially awkward and he doesn't know that, he's not attractive. He's very unappealing. He's over here eating his fish with his hands. It's like, ew. Nathan says, I can't do Shakespeare. Wanted to do some Shakespeare-like characters, but never felt right. Yeah, I did. I did live. I had done, I think 2 Shakespeare plays, and I had done, what is it? I'd done 1 character. I think I tried for 2. But I only did 1 character. I don't even remember the character. I was basically an orator. That seems to be my go-to role anywhere, is I am the orator. I'm the guy who curtains up, curtain down. I barely have read any Shakespeare. So like my brother is a bigger Shakespeare guy than I am, and I'm not one for poetry either. So, which is funny because I haven't finished it, but I have almost finished Dante's Inferno. I still have the bookmark. I have the book within arm's reach. I can actually grab it right now. I haven't finished Dante's Inferno. Nathan says he's partial to Hamlet. I saw the movie with Mel Gibson years ago. I saw, like, my brother loved that movie. My sister loved that movie. I found it so freaking boring. I couldn't tolerate it. Like, I simply couldn't tolerate it. It was just like, who likes this stuff? Like, it's just boring. Now, I'm curious how I'd feel about it now that I'm older, because, I found myself as I'm older, I'm more intrigued by things and learning. But that was a movie that just, for whatever reason, it was just boring. And that's been my interpretation of Hitler. Ooh, I was going to say of Shakespeare, is that it's just boring. I'm more interested in World War II history. World War II history is very interesting to me. But also my favorite fictional character is Robin Hood. I adore Robin Hood. I think Robin Hood's fantastic. And I haven't seen World War I is better. World War I is fun. As fun as that could be. World War I has some interesting things in it. In my opinion, World War II is better history. World War I is just mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake. Like, it's like a Grant Morrison story where you're like, oh, things can't get worse. And then they do. And you're like, oh, well, they can't get worse than this. And then they do. And you're like, okay, I know I said it before. I said it twice before. It can't possibly get any worse. And then it does. And you're just like, okay, this is like reading World War I. Well, World War II is the same thing. World War II has plenty of colorful characters. It's just they get overshadowed by some of the major players. I would say that's probably the accurate way of looking at it, is they get overshadowed by the English or the British. They have some interesting characters in their fold. The Finns have interesting characters in their fold. The Russians and Japanese have some interesting characters. Germany has several interesting characters. America, I think, has the most interesting characters. I'd say America has like the best interesting characters because America is so all over the place that the different personalities and the different goals and the different agendas of everybody. This is World War I is better. World War I is the party with so many colorful characters, I lose count. Probably. But like, that's actually on get back on topic. That's actually a good place to start if you're thinking about creating background characters, maybe even a main character. Even is looking at just different historic figures in terms of characters. I've mentioned this before to one of my players who was struggling with understanding how to make a character archetype and a personality because he's young. He doesn't know anything. He hasn't lived life. So he was struggling. And I was telling him, well, okay, look up historic figures, look up historic characters, look up George Washington, look up Abraham Lincoln, and just do some research in them and see what about them interests you. See if there's anything that interests you. And then start working from there. Start expanding and exploring from there. And I know history isn't everyone's thing. But like I've mentioned to him, it's like, go out, start looking at some of these people. Look at them, some of the things they've done. Nathan says, I do that sometimes. My Sky Pirate character is like the Red Baron meets Morin. Okay, I have no idea who Morin is, but I know who the Red Baron is. Yeah, I tend to when I make characters, I always think of like, okay, what type of quirk do I want them to have? That's probably where I start with all. Sorry, I'm scratching my shoulder and I bumped the mic. That's probably where I start with all of my characters. Is I start with where or what quirk do I want them to have? That's what I want. I want to know what quirk am I going to give them? Are they going to have a quirk where they're a happy-go-lucky person? Are they going to have a quirk where they're a sad person? Are they going to have a quirk where they're an honor-bound or duty-bound person? Because they're not the same thing. You could probably say I take like a Chris Nolan approach to a character where I look for like a single word to define this character. And then I begin to build around that word. Like, this is an honorable person. What was their life like? Was their life terrible? And were they like stepped on and beat up and pushed around? Was their life chaotic? Like something had to push the person to be the way they are, to have the support network and the growth that they have. Something had to do that. Something had to trigger it. I was talking to one of my friends the other day, and I was telling them about. They asked me, "Did I make my bed in the morning?" And he was going on around. Him and I were going around and around about that. And I was like, "No, I didn't make my bed in the morning. Like my parents didn't yell at me to make my bed. They I think they tried it once or twice. They would have us do it as like a punishment." And he was pissed. He was like, "It's stupid. It's dumb." And I was telling him, I would have loved to have had that. And he was like, no, you don't. And it's an example of the grass is greener on the other side. Because I understand where he's coming from, where no, that's hell on earth. And if I were in his shoes, yeah, it would be. You know, if I actually had to go through it, I'm as I said before, I'm a freedom loving person. So having someone tell me, "Hey, make your bed every day," that would at my core annoy me. You know, I'd really hate that. I know I would. But my side of it is I had a very chaotic upbringing. And when I was in retail, that was the same experience I had working in retail. It was like, here's a rule. And then they promptly ignore the rule, you know, because it varies manager to manager. It varies person to person. It's like, why? Like, don't make it a rule then. Just say, hey, this is what I want you to do. Because it's not a rule. A rule is uniformal. Like, everyone does it. It's not like, well, sometimes we do it, sometimes we don't. That's not a rule. That's a guideline. A guideline is if we can do it, we do it. If something comes up that's in a higher priority queue, then we won't do it. Moriarty's favorite sharpshooter. Oh, okay. Saying we're referencing Moran. Nathan says, I'll have to do the same for some of my characters. Hell, a few of my characters are defined by scorn and bad luck. Right. And like those can be helpful. And they're really good, I would say, early on in your writing process. It gets a little like you can't use those when you're doing a shopkeeper. Like it goes back to what I was saying earlier about do you have any living relatives? Do you have any like friends? And if your answer is no, it's like, well, then what are you living for? Like, why are you doing what you do? So, you know, you got to have a more depth. You can't just have, oh, I am an exile from my society. I am an outcast or I'm a convict. You got to have something where it's like, I have a family or I have a woman that I'm chasing after. I'm going to win her heart. I got ran out of town by the bandits or by the cowboys, whatever, you know, whatever your explanation is. You know, I look at it with my shopkeepers. I tend to take on the approach like, I mean, it could be that I come from a retail background, but I come at it from, you know, these are ordinary people. You know, they're looking to pay their bills. They want to watch their television. They want to get home, watch their television, or they want to get home and read a book. They want to go home and do their jogging, their walking. You know, they have things they want to do. You got to spend time with their kids. So like understanding that makes you understand how the shopkeeper is going to behave, how they're going to conduct themselves. And then you start taking that, spreading it to other people. Spreading it to, okay, here's a bank teller. Here's a airplane pilot. Here's a taxi driver. And you start expanding out. It's like, okay, these are ordinary people. Now, once you have the ordinary people defined, you're better able to define the extraordinary people, both the good and the bad. You're able to make your villains more dynamic. You're able to expand upon them. What makes them a threat? What makes them tick in terms of my hero? Like they're going up against my hero. What makes them interesting? Why do you want to see these two go head to head? Why do you want to see these two clash? Why do you want to see them fight? And yeah, freedom, freedom, freedom. Hoy! Yeah. freedom is a good motivation for characters. You know, a character who values freedom is a Catwoman is a great example of that. She's a character who values her freedom. You know, early renditions of Catwoman, her whole relationship with Batman was heavily dependent on her desire just to possess him. It wasn't like, oh yeah, I like this man. It's no, I want this this thing, and I want it to be mine. That was her whole motivation. And she's had to go through several writers, through several arcs, several breakdowns of her, several reboots for her to actually maintain some level of consistent behavior pattern for her actual interest in Batman. Yeah, so I'm right now sitting with my thoughts on this, and I'm looking at, and one of the things, I think I brought this up before in one of my previous streams, and this is appropriate time to talk about it, is in my one game we had this character, I had this NPC. He was a very weird character, weird, and he made everyone feel uncomfortable. He was very touchy, very hands-on, very soft-spoken, very gentle, but he wielded basically a lightsaber. It was a lightsaber, but he wielded a lightsaber. He had the Force, so he had like this magic, and no one knew where his power source came from. He wasn't a wizard. He didn't describe himself as a wizard. He described himself as a knight. So it was weird to them, the way he behaved, his conduct, etc. And they didn't understand that this guy is intelligent. That's his stat. His main stat is intelligence. He's a great fighter, but he's intelligent. And so moment. So he's intelligent, and they didn't understand this. They underestimated that part. And so they're talking about him. And every time they talk about him, they mention, should we listen to blue skin here? This guy with blue skin. Should we be listening to this guy who's blue skinned? They just kept saying it over and over again. Who wants to go with blue skinned guy here? And after about the fourth or fifth time of them saying this in his this is about the eighth time by this point in the game, but it's like the third or fourth time in his presence they had said this about him, like he wasn't even there. And he mentioned, just very calmly, very curiously, because he's not from around there, you know, he's new to the party. He's like, do you guys often refer to each other by your skin color, or is that just me that you do that too? Because I've noted that no one is referring to her as purple skin, and no one's referring to him as tan skin. You are only referring to me as blue skin. And the players, it was hilarious. It was a shame it was virtual. It wasn't in real life, because several of them were like, well, damn, he just called us all racist. And it was hilarious. It was great, because the players didn't get it. They got it, but they didn't get it until he pointed that out to them, that they were perfectly fine understanding each other as individuals and recognizing each other as individuals, recognizing each other as people. But when it came to this NPC, they just completely treated him as an NPC. And so I took that as an opportunity. I used the race angle to bring to their attention, this is a living world. This is a world. So you can't just play it like it's a video game. As well, at the same time, I was able to make them critically think about what they're saying and critically think about how they're approaching the problems and encounters that they're coming face to face with. That was my main goal, was to make them assess and critically think about how they view this world and how they view the circumstances they're in. Well, I'm going to wrap it up here soon. But before I do, Nathan, I want to ask you, do you have any other questions? Anything you want to throw at me? I might be able to field. I might be able to answer. Not really? All right. Then I'm going to bug out. Thank you, Nathan, for hanging out. Thank you, anyone else who's watching this in the future. Please like, share, and subscribe. I'm Crusader Jackaran. You guys have a nice day. I'll see you next Thursday. Peace.